Hello and welcome to another album run on PopCulture Reacts, and this time it's his decision of what we're doing.
It's his. He made it himself.
um, one of your boy bands. Are they
Whoa,
your
whoa, 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 whoa. Phraseology. I know where you're going with that, but when you say boy bands, it makes it sound like I've bought Westlife or Boyzone or Take That. One of the bands in my stable of boys, I think,
yes?
is what you mean by that.
Are they your top boy?
Yeah, my favourite band, Radiohead, and they are my favourite band of all. Probably to a large degree because they have never released anything I haven't liked, which is a really sort of stellar output for a band that's been around for so long and released so much stuff. And also seeing the careers of Tom York and Johnny Greenwood go on and do other creative endeavours that I've really, really liked as well. But I just, and I guess we'll see as we journey through their albums. I feel like they're a band that rarely stands still and is always trying to iterate on themselves and trying to stretch what they can do and what they're able to do. And funny enough, we're not starting with the first album, are we? We're starting with the Bends, which is the second
Yeah,
album. And the main reason why we're not starting with Pablo Honey is we recorded some Pablo Honey, didn't we, a long time ago? And that was
it
just
died.
before the apocalypse of my laptop. So we lost those. But because you'd listened to Pablo Honey during that period, it would be a bit rubbish to try and pretend that you were reacting to it from scratch because you wouldn't have been.
No.
But as you have heard Pablo Honey, and I guess you've got an idea of Radiohead because you've heard of them, you'll have heard some of their songs along the way. Let's start off with where you're at with Radiohead.
So I know the singles, and it's never ever catched me. It's one of those of I think when they were coming out, I was very much into like if the indie stuff that I was listening to was much more the more rockier end of it. So like Wild Hearts, Terrorvision, um, Ocean Color Scene, stuff like that, Manics that were much more would lean into the other shit that I listened to, like the metal and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And I was just thought, oh, that's the fucking dreary band
I
because
mean it's often the descriptor of them, isn't it? Like the depressing band, the band you listen to top yourself. I've heard all of these descriptors along the way. Funny enough, I mean, and it would be unlikely, as I'm saying, they're my favourite band ever, that they really hit me this way because that would say a lot about me. But I've never got that side. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not so naive or so blinkered to it that I feel like it isn't. I would say fraught with emotional content for a lot of it, and sometimes leans into some of the darker areas of life. But by darker areas of life, I mean sort of mentally darker areas of life rather than serial killers, etc., etc., etc. But I don't know. It just never has. It's never kind of got me. In fact, if anything, I feel the other end when I come out of listening to their albums. Generally, I feel invigorated. A bit of a kind of there are other people in the world who get it, and you know you can create something beautiful out of something quite dark.
I think with them, when I've heard stuff, it's either on the radio or in a pub or whatever. I'm not really taking in the lyrics, so it might be that lyrically there's a lot there that I've never really got. It's
Yeah,
just musically, it is like things like No Surprise and stuff like that. It's just slow and dull, and I'm
such
like,
a such a beautiful piece of music. One of their best songs.
but when you're
And you
used
say
to,
dull, getting a
but
bit.
when you are listening to faster, heavier, bouncy stuff, it if I'm in a pub, I want to hear that, not sort of slow stuff, and
Um,
it just one
I,
of those that
I'm
it never
I'm
sort
gonna
of came
go
back
with
from that.
that's on you though, isn't it? That's you going. I only want to listen to a certain sort of thing. That's not a mark against the quality of the music. Because if you follow that token, then everything but that is going to be.
But
dull
no,
by comparison.
but it's that thing of, as I said, whenever I was exposed to
Yeah.
it was never in a
Well, I'm going to
purposeful. Let's do
expose myself to you right now. No, I'm not. I'm not.
it.
We're not going to.
No,
If any,
that's off camera.
if yeah, I was gonna say if we get strikes just for that alone, then I might have to cut that bit out. But there'll be no exposing. So yeah, we're gonna go into the second album, the Bends, and funny enough, we're starting off with here's a selling point. My least favorite of their albums. Uh, Now I say this based off of if you had, let's use the kids example. Everyone loves the kids example. If you had 10 to 12 children, with which you all loved, one of them you might love a little bit less than the rest. And that's kind of
So,
where this album sits with me.
so for me, in the Rammstein world, where I feel about Rosenrot, that it's a great album, but it's my least
Yeah,
favorite of Rammstein.
which you're wrong about, but like go. Feel free to continue to be wrong about that, but yeah, that equivalency when you kind of love it all. But I would say that one of the things that I probably am really grateful for it, especially existing for even it being my least favorite one, is I don't know what would have happened without this album. So they come off the success of Creep. Now Pablo Honey did okay, but Creep was the thing that really launched them. And in recording this album, you then had a record company going, "Come on,
We want
you've
11
had
creeps.
yep, you've had the big hit now, bang go." And I would say that for me, it is their most commercially viable of all their albums, and probably the most radio play friendly. And bearing in mind, I don't think it's necessarily massively radio play friendly, but I think it kind of sits in that. And I certainly remember. I mean, this came out in March '95, and I was really looking forward to this coming out because I'd really enjoyed Pablo Honey, and uh, I didn't have a lot of friends who'd listened to Pablo Honey, but I certainly had a lot of friends that bought the Bends, listened to the Bends. Now, partially that's because British music was in the absolute ascendancy at the time, wasn't it? We were kind of moving away from the saccharine pop of the late 80s to early 90s. And you said it earlier about boy bands. I think a lot of the music buying audience was getting sick of that sort of stuff, so was looking for something else. Britain was going through that bit of a transition where it had been pretty bleak for a while. Yeah, stop me if you've heard this before. Like now, I reckon there's a new wave of music coming soon for us. And I don't know, there was a bit of a kind of rise of UK pride, and I say this in coach terms because I saw probably we're seeing now probably some of the downsides and the dark sides to that British pride that come along at that time. But
Well,
yeah, this took a quite a foothold in a lot of people I knew, so it was getting a lot of play, and I think it whilst not smashing the world for number ones and being an album that was all like got to, I mean, I think got to number 4 in the UK album charts, but I think it really got them an audience that wasn't necessarily there other than for Creep.
mm. But the thing is, you got to think at that point, you got the second Manix album, Oasis dropping What's the Story, Blur,
Yeah, that comes out later this year. What's the story, doesn't it?
Park
We've had
House.
definitely maybe at this time, and
Yeah,
yeah, Blur on the rise, and just a plethora of bands, wasn't there? I mean, it was. I will say, living through that time, it was an exciting time for music because you were getting lots of new bands constantly, and okay, some of the times they would sound very similar or be riffing off each other, but yeah, years and years and years of like factory style music was finally being taken off the radio and replaced with something else.
lads with guitars.
Yeah, yeah, and lasses with guitars as well. There's loads of bands that come out in this period that with like female fronted and things like that. I think it was a very nice time for music. So first up we have Planet Telex, which is technically one of the singles, but it was a double A side. It come out with High and Dry, which we'll get to. It's later on in the album, but yeah, technically a single. No vid, but who needs a vid? Vids are for stinkers. Right, shall we start on the Radiohead adventure?
Let's get away in the
Let's
bends.
do this. Everything is broken.
And everywhere else. That was interesting. It
Good, good, good.
I can
Carry
see
on.
I can see where other bands that I know more of, like Gomez and things like that, took influences from this with the the electronics side of it, and sort of using the pitch tones and delays and stuff, that is more than what the other bands at this point are doing. Because said you, if you're looking at when this came out, you've said you've got the second Manix album, which is just distorted rock. You've got Oasis, which is very clean. They've not gone jangly and a bit weird at that point. So I think these were probably the band that influenced those later
The
ones
band that
that then
launched 1,000 ships, that sort of thing. Yeah,
that
yeah.
that then you can then see, oh, we can also do that as well as what we're doing at the minute. Is very dour. I will say that.
Well, funnily enough, like we talked about in the intro about how people sort of kind of say depressing, and this is a song ostensibly about depression. So you know, buried the lead a little bit when I went, "That's not all about depression." But it is. Or I guess for me, it's always been a bit of a combo. Like bearing in mind what we're talking about the world at the time, I think this was talking about depression and the state of and I'm going to say UK, but primarily England, I think at the time, and like
Mm,
certainly when it keys into that, everything is broken because I think everything had been broken for a while, and I think it was about pulling that back. But then you pull into some of the other lyrics, and much more about internal strife and struggle, and how one feels.
yeah,
And funny enough, I was going to say like this track is the path for the future. I would say what you see here, or what you hear here. Bearing in mind it's the opening song of this album, I would say plays out much more as their career goes on. I think this is almost a blueprint of what is to come. And funny enough, this song is the only song on the album that wasn't written before they went to record it. So this one was actually performed, recorded, written whilst they were recording the album. And in fact, this one, rumor has it that this one was recorded or certainly written when they were pissed, and Tom York was laid on the floor singing the lyrics, and that's where the song birthed out of. So yeah, it has a different path to I think a lot of the other stuff that you'll hear on this album. But certainly this
mm,
this for me is I mean, it's massively different for me than Pablo Honey, and something you said
yeah,
there about bands picking up on what they do here, and maybe integrating it into stuff they do later. I said the same about Pablo Honey. I think it was quite funny because when you listen to Pablo Honey, you sent me some messages, didn't you? Sort of saying, "Oh, it sounds like A B C D E F and G on different tracks." And I
yeah,
said, "Yeah, and it was released before A B C D E F and G. That's why A B C D E F and G kind of exist." And I think there's a bit of that certainly in early career Radiohead. I think when we get into later albums, I think that slightly differs, and you don't get quite as much. I don't know. I was gonna say copying. Copying's the wrong word, but maybe you don't get so many
obvious
people trying to.
influences.
Yeah, yeah. I think at a point people kind of go, let's just leave them on their own, let them do their thing. They're over there.
Yeah, because there
Yeah,
was
I
a
love it.
couple of songs that was that in that first album that was just like that stinks of Ash, who obviously
Yeah,
come out
yeah,
5 or 6 years down the line and things like
yeah.
that. So, but yeah, I can see why 11-year-old me at the time didn't want anything to do with this. When, as I said, what I was listening to was either rowdy or shouty and much more up tempo.
Trying to do the maths. I was about 18, I think, when this came out. Maybe no, was I? What year was this? What year
You
was
said
this? Did I say
95, didn't you?
95. Yeah, so I'd have been 18. And this was right up my alley.
But yeah, as I said,
And it's one of my favorites from this album. I will say that. I love it. But then again, I love that with the foresight of, or with the hindsight, should I say, of
mm,
what this probably turns into, and how this influences their sound in later albums.
yeah, as I said, at this point, I'd found Green Day and songs about wanking and things like that, and
Wow.
yeah, I wasn't at this sort of level of deep music. I was
I
only
don't
a
know, do you?
couple of years off of
I,
WF Superstars the album.
I think for me, probably, I mean, I was big into my hip hop at this point, and I think I just about started to go back in time on music as well to find some older stuff. But I think this was probably the right band at the right time. I think
Mm.
not this album so much, but there are sort of trends in it throughout the album. But I think that sort of socio-political side of what music can be. I've probably heard some protest songs in the past, but I think this was the first time that maybe music really spoke to me in that way of I don't know, finding some parity with what I was starting to believe the world was like, and
Yeah.
hearing that in music, and hearing someone else who seemed to have similar ideas and ideals of the world as I did. So yeah, it was
And,
quite an
and
awakening, although not so much on this album. But yeah, this album was the
but
start of that.
it's I think it's also having that band that are yours as well saying it. You know,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it,
yeah,
you know, it's that thing. It's like something we'll be doing at some point on the channel about our favorite '90s stuff, and there's going to be stuff in there that some people go, "What the fuck?" But it's your band, at your time, and that was the right thing for you.
I'm having it
And
now. No one's going to say what the fuck to my top five from the 90s because they're all absolutely amazing songs.
but yeah, I am intrigued for the rest of this album, and especially when you say that this is the most
Y-
sort of latter
yeah,
day side
yeah, yeah.
sounding
I'd say
wise.
this is the one that shows the blueprints of what's to come more. Whereas I think I don't know. I might step back on this when we get through the tracks, but I think you'll see the path from Pablo Honey a bit more on a lot more of the tracks, and maybe a bit of a path to more of what was going on in music at the time for a lot of the others. But as I always felt, always with that Radiohead style into it, and a big part of that, and I know I said I love the lyrics to this. I love the vocals. I love Tom York's vocal performances. I think it's songs like this. Well, I say songs like this. That's a bit of a lie. I find it on most of the songs that he does. I find that his voice is as much as an instrument as any other instrument in it. And I've heard people criticize his singing style, but I think he allows it to go all over the place along with the music, and I just find it captivating. And musically for this, the introduction of maybe the more electronic sides, the keyboards, the sort of more space-esque kind of sound effects going on in the background that accompany with those guitars. Yeah, absolutely spot on for me. Absolutely love it.
So what is next?
So next up, God, you can't ask me to use my memory. Hold fire. Just scrolling down to the track listing. Oh, next up is the Bends, the titular track.
Ooh. So we will be back very shortly with the bends on the bends. And
By
until
the
then,
Bends. No, they're not by the Bends. But if
but
only one of
until
the
then,
band, if only one of the band members was called Ben, that would have been handy. The
I don't
Bends on
know.
the Bends by Ben. But no.
But as always, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all the YouTube things, comments down there. And until next time, goodbye.